Bruce, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you doing this morning?
Good. Trying to sort through everything that took place over the weekend and how this is going to play out tomorrow night when the rankings come out.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a false step here because there's so much left to play. TCU had a big win, but TCU is kind of like the leader in the clubhouse now. The rest of their schedule is against real soft teams, and the reality is Baylor, who I think will be behind them, even though Baylor just smoked Oklahoma and Norman, Baylor has the win head-to-head over TCU. Baylor has a really bad non-conference schedule. TCU's is a little better. But again, Baylor plays K-State late in the year. If Baylor wins that game, and as Baylor is 11-1, same record as TCU, Baylor's going to be ahead of them. I think Baylor's going to end up going to the playoff.
Whoa, okay, wait a minute here. So you think that because of their schedule the rest of the year, Baylor will leapfrog TCU?
I think because they have the head-to-head against TCU, that'll be a key chip. I just think even if TCU's non-conference is better than Baylor's, which it is, they played Minnesota. Playing Minnesota to me, a team that lost to Illinois, I know Minnesota has a pretty good record, is not going to trump a head-to-head outcome as we've seen, especially when everybody else plays the same teams, in the Big 12. There's no conference title game. I think TCU is going to, needs Baylor to lose, and they probably need some help somewhere along the way, just in case. I don't see the Big 12 getting two teams.
What about Arizona State, Ohio State chances?
Arizona State's got their own destiny in their hands. I mean, it's shocking to me because I was at the game on a Thursday night where UCLA put 62 points on them. Defense was terrible. I mean, credit to Todd Graham and that staff. They had to replace 9 starters. They're playing well. I mean, they got after Everett Golson, sacked him 7 times, 5 turnovers. If they win out, because they still have to play Arizona, who has a good record and has the win over Oregon, and then they would play Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, I think they're going to the playoff because I think that their record would be strong. They've already got 4 ranked wins, and I think it's impressive given all the injuries and turnover they've had.
Wait, so you think Arizona State's going to beat Arizona and Oregon?
No, I don't think they're going to be, but
okay.
I think they control their own destiny. I think Oregon's going to win the Pac-12. I just think Marcus Mariota's playing at a higher level than everybody else. And I think their defense is average, but I think their offense is so good. The rest of the regular season is pretty easy. They'll probably get ASU in the conference title game, and I think they'll beat ASU, and I think that'll give them one of those 4 spots.
Okay, so we have Oregon in and we have Baylor in. So that means which team from the SEC or teams from the SEC?
My gut feeling is that Alabama is going to be that team. Now, so far, Alabama, their best win just came this weekend at Tiger Stadium. It's a tough place to play. They beat LSU. They're going to get Mississippi State this weekend, number 1, Mississippi State at home, and then they get Auburn at home. There's a stat to keep in mind. Blake Sims, their quarterback, first-year starter, is a radically different quarterback away versus home. I mean, usually there's a difference, but his quarterback rating in games at home is like 209. On games on the road is like 129. And granted, they've played their 2 best opponents have been on the road, but the disparity should not be that significant.
Here's my only concern. If let's say Mississippi State loses, but it's close, I don't think Mississippi State should drop out of the top 4. Will they?
They might not if it's close. Again, it's a road game. Mississippi State also, they're going to get a chance. Now, Mississippi State's non-conference isn't good either, but in the SEC, let's be realistic, it doesn't seem to matter as much. But the last 3 games, they have to go to Alabama, they have to go to Ole Miss. I think if they win one of those 2 games, and if they're 12-1, and if they lose, and let's say Bama ends up going in front of them, I think that they would have a good chance to get in, but if I'm them, I don't want to get caught in the middle of this kind of, hoping that you need help. I mean, I do think, reality, asked me at Ohio State, I think a 12-1 or an 11-1, if there's 2 one-loss SEC teams, I think that might trump Ohio State just because Ohio State has this great win at Michigan State, but that's all they have. And, maybe they need Nebraska to beat Wisconsin this weekend, so Nebraska would be ranked late in the year when they play in the Big 10 title game. But there's just not, the Big 10 is just so mediocre, and Ohio State does have that bad loss early in the season, against Virginia Tech. I think Ohio State's improved more than anybody in the country to that point, but just the Big Ten's dragging them down.
Florida State, you see them running the table?
I do. Miami, I like Brad Kaya, the true freshman quarterback, and I think Duke Johnson's terrific. But any good game Miami is, good opponent Miami has faced, their defense has not shown up. They lost by double digits. I'd be surprised if Miami was able to go toe-to-toe with FSU. I think they're improved. I just don't think they're that improved, and I wouldn't bet against Jameis Winston.
You mentioned Mariota. I think he's the most valuable player in the country. When I look at that offensive line, and they kind of held on for dear life. They beat Michigan State. They beat Stanford. It seems like it revolved around him more than any of these other Heisman quarterbacks. So Dak Prescott's great, but Mississippi State's got a great defense. So I lean towards Mariota right now. If you put a gun to my head on who's my vote, what about you?
I'm with you. If you watch the game the other night, Utah had a couple of sacks early. Utah has a great defensive line, really swarming defense. There was a play where Mariota should have been sacked. I think any other quarterback in the country gets sacked. He's just so dynamic. He's able to get away and get like a 15-yard gain. I think he's playing at so much of a higher level. Their system is really good. He's a good fit for it. They have good skill guys around them. And, I just think you've seen a guy really, really mature. And there is a big gap between him and whatever's behind him. And I think without him, given that their defense is pretty suspect, I think Oregon's probably only like an 8 or 9 win team without him. But with him, I think they're a legit national title contender.
He's Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports college football analyst. His new book, The Quarterback, is now available. The Business of Quarterback Evolution and Development, featuring Trent Dilfer, Johnny Manziel, and George Whitfield. If, let's say we're looking at Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota with evaluation and development. So knowing what you know from writing this book, how would you assess them at next level, or can you?
It's tough. I think Jameis is actually a more polished passer. I think Marcus is a better athlete. He's much faster. The thing that you have to consider with Jameis is just the knucklehead behavior off the field. You're talking about investing a lot of money to have him be the face of a franchise if he's a quarterback. We're talking about a quarterback. We're not talking about a linebacker or a wide receiver. You need him to be, a lock-solid, guy you can count on. But, the way he plays in the pocket is terrific. If Jameis Winston had no character question marks, I think Jameis Winston is a first pick in the draft kind of talent, because when you watch him play, and he's just wired, and this is one of the things I kind of get into in the book about certain guys have been born and are wired a certain way to process things really fast in the middle of the chaos. And, Peyton Manning is one of those guys. Brett Favre was one of those guys. And Jameis Winston seems to be one of those guys. Trent Dilfer has some great detail in the book. Dilfer got to spend, a lot of time hands-on working with Winston and identified some of these really innate qualities that he has, and they've been developed pretty well on the field. And I think that's what makes him such an interesting study for the draft. Whereas I think, Mariota has blossomed. He's physically developed a lot since he's been there. I think he's answered some questions. I think there was a little bit of skepticism about him downfield passing and some of the ways he fits. But I think he's taken a lot of steps, and the people I've talked to think he will be a terrific NFL quarterback. He's got a little bit of Kaepernick in him. He doesn't have quite the cannon of an arm, but I think he's a little smoother.
What about Manziel, knowing what you know about him and his future in the NFL?
He's not Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was first guy in, last guy out. They're, about the only thing they have in common is Johnny's a shorter quarterback. They're both really good athletes too. But, Johnny is ultra competitive, and, seeing the behind the scenes that, I was able to see both at Texas A&M and with George Whitfield and Kevin O'Connell as they trained him for the draft, he is very, very smart. He is very competitive. The things I'd be skeptical with Johnny is, physically, he's not very big. In terms of thickness, and takes some shots, but he is tough. I think he's going to have some success in the NFL. I don't know how long he'd be able to sustain it, but the one thing that makes me think Johnny Manziel is going to be a star at some point in the NFL is anybody who's ever doubted Johnny Manziel has been proven wrong.
Speaking of arms, that kid at A&M,
Kyle
Allen. Oh boy. To step in there in that game, he's got an unbelievable arm.
Yeah, he's a very polished kid. You know, he's one of these guys. He came up, actually, one of Dilfer's proteges, Dennis Guile, who's in Arizona, who's worked with a bunch of good quarterbacks, has developed him. I think talking to the A&M coaches yesterday, one of the things that really impressed him was some of the checks he made at the line of scrimmage, things he identified. This is his first road start. And
it's at Auburn.
Yeah, at Auburn. Craziness. You're a 23-point underdog, and he's identifying things. He throws 4 touchdowns early in the game, leads them to a win. I don't think we want to jump the gun too much because we saw Kenny Hill and everybody, got overly excited about him. But Kyle Allen was expected to be a star. We'll see if how he deals with the success from here. But I think if I was an A&M fan, I'd be very excited about his future.
Good luck with the book, Bruce.
My pleasure, Dan. Always great talking to you.
Bruce Feldman. The book is The Quarterback, available now. The Business of Quarterback Evaluation Development, featuring Trent Dilfer, Johnny Manziel, George Whitfield.